Mr. Chairman, this is off point, but would you agree the same thing applies to the CFPB?
Can you clarify, Senator?
That the data that CFPB is collecting should meet the same standards as the data that we're talking about here? I'll withdraw the question. Thank you. I've got a more relevant question here. We'll talk offline about that.
Okay.
I'm concerned about the fact that this area has no borders. 47% of all global online retail transactions are made in China or from China. And that 40% of all Chinese consumers are using new payment systems like we're talking about today. They're talking about WeChat, Ant Financial, and others. This is a very rapidly growing sector over there. And I'm very concerned that we have our regulatory environment here, but we have a lot of transactions going on around the world that come and go across borders. What recommendations, given the global impact, and I'd like all three of you to comment on that, what do you recommend that what should we be doing here to get ahead of this?
Excellent question, and I think it goes back to something Eric pointed out before, and we've pointed out in this report, is that our regulatory system in the United States is quite fragmented. It could stifle innovation to some degree, and so that should be job number one for Congress and regulators, to make sure we have the right regulatory framework given these novel approaches being taken across the financial landscape.
Mr. Turner.
Yeah, thank you, Senator. And I think I just want to clarify something here. When you look at China, in some ways we actually are at a disadvantage because we are so advanced in our financial system. They are coming into a time where they did not have a lot of the infrastructure we have. So if you look at, you mentioned WeChat and payment systems like that, it's because there was not a robust card network presence or an ACH system like we have. So if you look at what we have in terms of peer-to-peer payment systems, mobile payment systems, those for the most part actually still, as you would say, ride the rails. They still process through the same systems of the large card networks or ACH. I think that that is going back to regulation, because these payment companies know that they are complying with the way things need to be done. They're using systems that are in place. So, I think as everybody has mentioned, if we want to push that innovation forward and you want to see us on par with, the innovation in China or something like that, there just needs to be more clarity on where fintechs can go. So if that's a regulatory sandbox or some sort of specific regulatory framework, I'm not sure, but it's going to be something like that.
Dr. Pasquale.
Yes, I think you're absolutely right, Senator, to point to China as a place where there's a great deal of innovation here. It's very cutting edge. I remember Connie Chan's piece for A16Z on WeChat and describing just how many things you can do within the app, and I'm sure that consumers would find it extremely convenient. And global cooperation among regulators could enable similar types of apps to arise in the US. My only caution would be that I think looking at some of the literature on the Chinese social credit scoring system, which I've cited in my written testimony, I do have concerns that the integration of information across so many sectors into one app could raise both concerns about competition and about privacy. So I think we should work with global regulators, but we should be cognizant of some of the risks.
Great. Mr. Turner, in the time remaining, talk to us about tokenization. Is this a way of the future relative to EMV chips and PIN efforts right now in terms of privatization and security of data?
Yeah, I think we're seeing, again, this is kind of an area where the U.S. is catching up on a lot of this. If you look at the U.K., the most popular form of payment is contactless card payments. So, we're just getting to the point where we're upgrading to EMV systems. And there is no doubt that those are more secure than what we had with magnetic strips. I think that, if we continue to see growth in payments being moved outside of the traditional network. So as we see cards go away, as we see cash go away, tokenization will be how everything is processed. And that will either be with our mobile wallets, if we're doing some sort of contactless transaction in a store, or if we're sending payments person to person.
Do you see this as a rising capability that makes some of, well, let's just say the terrorist network in terms of shadow banking and so forth? I mean, we've heard testimony here in other committees about that. Do you have any insights into that?
Really, I think that as we continue to have growth in digital payments, a lot of people don't realize that's probably good for controlling things like AML, anti-money laundering. I think that it creates an audit trail, and as we see things like blockchain technology start to take off, those transactions are recorded in an immutable ledger. You can't go back and change them. You can trace them, and you can actually do AML compliance in real time. So I think the way that we're moving in digital payments in the future is actually going to be a lot easier for companies to control these compliance costs.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.